So, welcome everyone. It's week 3, unit 3. I have a lot of topics to talk about today. Before I get started, though, you just settle into the present moment. Hopefully, you are already here in the present moment, thanks to your practices. But if not, that's okay. Be here now. What's so beautiful about being in the present moment is that that this moment is like the final answer. It's it's the finish line. We in our minds we have these ideas of like, between healing and growing and evolving and progressing and learning, all beautiful. Yet at the same time, this moment is the finish line. So just enjoy being in a state of complete, exactly as you are. Just right now, just sit, enjoy the breath, recognize this is all that you need right now. Cheers if you have a coffee or tea. So I say, like, this is all you need. Not this video necessarily, but like this moment in time. Then the mind's like, yeah, but sure would be nice if I had some answers. If I had just a little bit more clarity on X, Y, and Z. The mind always wants more. So, to start today, I had a member bring up a good topic. Actually, multiple members brought up good topics. So, thank you for everything you've been sharing and asking questions. A lot of questions were asked this week, and I'll be answering those in the Q&A after this. Um, but for the topic I want to jump into, I'm going to just read their message, and we'll go from there. By the way, any messages you do share, more than welcome. It can help inspire topics to speak on. At the same time, of course, I'll honor, your privacy. Just keep it anonymous if you'd like. So, just so you know. Same with the questions. All right, so here's the topic. I'm wondering your take on mental illness. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder last April after I attempted suicide um, at a and I was hospitalized. The teachings that Eckhart and yourself put out seem to attract me, and the idea and concept alone give me hope. But I find it so incredibly difficult to practice and maintain on a consistent basis. I have basically formed a belief that these teachings aren't powerful enough to transform me, as if I am an exception. Like I need something more, much more. I suffer a lot and have my entire adult life, so much that at this point it is what is so incredibly comfortable and familiar to me. I believe they mean the suffering has become comfortable and familiar. I don't expect you to have magical answers. I just know that if I don't reach out and seek help, that I could very easily find myself in desperation again. That is wise. So we're going to start with that. A lot of good pointers in there. Where to begin? I think I'd like to focus first on the individual stated that they actually feel a sense of comfort, maybe even safety, to their suffering, to their pain, to their stories, and to the labels. And that actually is very common. I believe we all fall into that to some degree. I myself had to become aware of that, and so investigate why. If we're in pain, right, we're in some form of discomfort. Yet there's some part of us that feels safe in it, that feels comfortable, or feels more ourselves in it, and just bring awareness to that, and maybe question it. Why would I ever choose to hold on to pain? For one, I believe it happens due to how our humans and our brains work. We find comfort in repetition. When it when something starts to become familiar, we start to trust it more, even if it's not even trustworthy. Just the fact that it's familiar gives us this sense of trust. And that even happens in the psychological side of our own pain and suffering. Some part of us recognizes it. It's comfortable, it's repetitive. Not only has it been repetitive recently, but it's been repetitive for most of our lives, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. When you add that much repetition, naturally we're going to attach that time. Repetition and time attaches itself to us, and that's something really powerful to bring awareness to, because really that sense of comfort is an illusion. You can't really be comfortable suffering. That's It's sort of a temporary and an illusionary form of safety, form of comfort, because its very essence is mixed up with discomfort. You see, I know for me, one of the big realizations that I came to over the years of self-inquiry and observation is I realized there was a part of me that liked drama, that liked suffering. It liked feeding negativity and circulating negative stories and fears and complaints and problems in my head. The voice in my head, right, would just play these stories over and over again. And one part of me is just like struggling, like, oh, this sucks, and oh, life, and just complaining. But then another part of me suddenly was like, wait a minute, why am I replaying this stuff if it's burning me up? And I had to recognize that there was some unconscious part of me that was playing out these patterns in order for me to then consciously have a choice as to whether I allow these patterns to continue or not. Because that's really a lot of what awakening and enlightenment is, bringing more choice into our experience of life, bringing more actual free will into our reality, not just physically, but psychologically what we're experiencing. The more you wake up, the more you realize you have a choice as to how you're experiencing life based on how you are perceiving, what level of perception are you looking through, and what practices and techniques do you have to handle suffering when you recognize it and you go, oh, there's suffering. Okay. And a large part of this too is the identification with the suffering. So for example, we say, I am angry. When you say I am angry, you are already claiming the anger. Or let's say depressed. I am depressed. Well, you're stating that you are the depression when you say that. And if you are the depression, then you can't get rid of it, or you would get rid of you, right? Even the idea of healing suddenly becomes threatening to who you are, because who you are is the thing that needs to be healed. And that's one of the common errors and reasons it's so difficult to get out of a lot of our suffering is because we're identified with it. Again, that comes into the feeling of it being comfortable somehow or being somehow attractive is we've invested a piece of ourselves in it. And so much of the healing and freedom comes when we can separate, when we can recognize I am experiencing anger, or I am experiencing depression, or I am experiencing fear, or anxiety, or jealousy, or judgment, but I am not that suffering. I am the one experiencing it. It's almost just like a little play on words, and yet underneath that is tremendous freedom when you can realize, oh, I am not the depression. I am not the anger or whatever reaction, especially when we find ourselves in the midst of a reactive state, an intense pain body. In the middle of that pain body, when we can go, wait a minute, I am not this pain body. This pain body is happening. It's consuming me in some way, but I am not the pain. I am the one experiencing the pain. Very powerful step back in order to give us the ability to decide how are we going to experience this pain. If we push it away, resist it, run away from it, escape, distract ourselves, try to numb it with some substance, it actually, the pain just grows because really all of that is, there's an underlying belief that you are the pain and that the pain is real. This is another big pointer with suffering is that on the deepest level, all suffering is illusion. The reason any anger, depression, fear has such a powerful control over us is because we believe it to be real. We believe it to be true. And I know for sure when you're in it, it definitely feels real, right? It's almost not fair to say that it is an illusion when you're in the midst of it, when you're in the grip of it. And yet, if you really want to free yourself and get out of it, then there's this realization of it, the very thing that is manipulating you or scaring you or just driving you crazy in some way is not actually real. That's how you pull it's like pulling the plug, out of the, I don't know, out of the boat or something. And then it sinks because in truth, all of our fear and our anxiety and depression, it's all because of the voice in our head. It's all because of the mind and imagination and conditioning. And when you can recognize that all of this intense negativity in some way or another is really coming from the source being our mind, you now have an ability to just step out of it, to just go, okay, well, that's there. I'm just going to step back a little and I'm going to observe all of this. And then when you're observing, there's a sense of spaciousness, of freedom, because your sense of self is not in that giant ball of chaos and drama, and pain and suffering and past and future and what ifs and all of that. You're kind of outside of it, just going, okay, there's that. And the more you can start to separate and observe it from an outside state, the more you can recognize this is not you. This is just something you're experiencing. And then continuously doing this creates an ability, almost a power, to then be able to turn it off whenever you wish. But before you can get to that level of certain mastery where you can completely control your inner state, you have to first work with what your inner state is in this moment and work with acceptance and surrender and non-resistance. Revisit thing again. So they said they were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And so just to speak on that, right? The medical and sort of scientific side of psychology. And one, I'm certainly not against you know, the scientific approach to psychology. I think it's beautiful in many ways, very organized and structured. Um, However, I do think there are some cracks within that system, right? Because how often do people get labeled as X, Y, or Z, bipolar or depression or who knows? There's so many different labels that the psychology world has. But once somebody gets labeled that, how often are they able to actually get to the root and heal things versus just giving them medication to numb? And it's a tricky topic because the medication is needed for some people. It's needed because if you don't have that to ground you, you fly off the tracks, right? And then you harm yourself or somebody else. So, not saying that it's medication is in any way negative. However, I do also believe that there are a lot of people who are diagnosed with psychiatric issues, and because psychologists in that whole field have not really gone into the conscious aspects and into healing on the spiritual level, they don't have the answers of how to heal a lot of these things. And so all they have left to do, the only option they have left is to medicate. And unfortunately, then, a lot of times medication has a lot of side effects. It has a lot, you end up having a dependency on it. Even often it turns into addictions. It can turn into a whole mess of other things. Um, and that's where I think kind of working with both is really powerful. And I've talked to people who've taken the teachings like of Eckhart, and in that moment they were in kind of a real unstable place, and so they needed medication to kind of ground them, be able to operate in a place where they didn't just get pulled into mass insanity within themselves. And because they were grounded from the medication, they were able to study the teachings and then start practicing and applying the teachings. And then they slowly, as they found more comfort and strength within themselves and healing and confidence within themselves, they slowly, while talking to their doctors, started taking away some of that medication. And some people to a point where they're no longer on any of it. I think that's beautiful. But something else that's really tricky with the psychology field and how they label us as, oh, you have PTSD, or oh, you're bipolar, or you're this, is that we can then take that label and identify with it and hold it to who we are. So, for example, this individual says, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So that may be helpful to kind of understand what's going on in your psyche, yet at the same time, it could become a challenge because then you're identifying yourself as I'm borderline identity disorder, I'm borderline identity disorder. And then it's almost like the minute you accept that as who you are, you stop yourself from being able to be more than that, because you are. Everyone is. Everyone. That's so much part of awakening, is realizing we're so much more than our human body, than our human stories, than any labels that are coming from anywhere. And not just, the psychiatric labels of doctors, which again, I'm not against. They have their purpose. They just can become obstacles. But I mean, everyone takes on labels, even beyond the medical ones. We take on labels our whole lives, right? Or we like certain labels, and we're like, yeah, I'm going to be this one. And so it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm not that one, but I'm going to be this other one. We take on all these labels, and all those labels, really, what they end up doing at the end of the day is diluting who we really are, because who we really are goes beyond any label, any name even. I mean, we even get identified with our names, right? My name's Ryan. No, actually, my name is not Ryan. The name Ryan Ostheimer is the name of my human body and of my story over the last 30 years, but it is not who I am. partly why I experience so much freedom from drama and suffering, especially when you're talking about transcending suffering. A big part of what we're also talking about here is transcending fear. And so much of fear is rooted in the fear of death. And so much of our reactivity often can be sourced back to some part of us wanting to maintain our survival, to be in this defensive mode or this like fight or flight type of mode in order to um, preserve our life. It's nature, really. I mean, it's something you see everywhere in the animal kingdom, and humans have it too. But a lot of times we don't need it. We don't need the adrenaline burst 90% of the time that it consumes us, because we're not actually in danger, but our minds perceive that we're in danger, and we have this huge psychological or physiological experience as if we're in danger when in reality we're not. And thinking you're in danger is not an enjoyable experience. So, anytime you experience fear, there's some part of you that thinks you're being threatened, and that's not enjoyable, right? Uh, to feel it. One definition of salvation from the Christian church is to feel safe, because there's almost nothing better than feeling safe. And we were children, and we were with our family or friends that we trusted and everything, and there's just something so powerful, beautiful about being in an environment where you feel safe, where you feel like you can just relax, let down your guard, and just be yourself and enjoy. Um, there's such a peace in that. And with that peace, there's a sense of trust. And one thing I've come to realize too is that I don't have to trust humans. That would be naive to trust every human out there, because many of them are still operating in unconsciousness, operating in completely identified with themselves and the stories, and it's all about the me type of reality. It would be silly of me to just trust every single human when when humans want to act like animals, or even more, even worse than animals. However, I do 100% absolutely trust life. I trust the universe, or the present moment, without any doubt. If I And that's why I don't really experience much fear. When you trust life, you understand that everything that happens within the scope of life is being directed by something much bigger than us, something like incomprehensibly intelligent, and thank goodness for us, also full of love. The more you trust life, there's this really powerful correlation too. The more that I noticed, I started to really genuinely trust life. It's almost like the more life became trustworthy. There's some kind of connection there. When I used to think of life as being this like dangerous environment, and like just chaos, and everything's out of control and it's all negative, I used to attract a lot of that because I was perceiving a lot of that. And so the same can be said, with manifestation, as far as actually manifesting or experiencing a real positive world of, of love and of compassion, of peace. It doesn't mean I don't run into difficult people here and there, but I never feel threatened. And I truly believe it's because I have a deep, almost relationship, friendship, or even more, it's like a child and parent type relationship where I'm the child of, of admiration, love, and trust for what is, for this moment. Because I recognize this moment is God, if you want to call it God, or call it whatever you wish, but that high power, that supreme energy of creation. It's right here in this moment, and it always has been. It's always been here. Uh, I just wasn't always here, because in my own present moment, just as you have to be in your own present moment. Um, this will start getting into some really deep, reflective perspective here. Uh, but another piece of this: nothing happens by accident. There are no accidents. Everything has a reason. I, that's not a belief. It's like a knowing. I just know, and I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. I've questioned it a billion times, and every time it was answered back. And that's kind of the beauty too. Life, the divine, the universe, again, whatever you wish to call it, is incredibly patient. You can run away and come back, run away and come back as many times as you like. You will always be forgiven and you will always be welcome back. And I don't know, there's something so refreshing in that, for one. But also, there's so much to learn. And suffering is not like a negative thing that we're just victims of. Suffering is really a valuable tool for us to learn from, and to extract lessons from, and to move beyond. That's what suffering is like. It's like a growth agent, right? It sort of kicks us in the ass and says, wake up. In the Hindu mythology, it's represented by the deity Kali, and Kali is like this like vicious looking skulls and death and all this intensity. What I see that as is the divine in the sort of like intense, more forceful, straight to the point type of teaching. It can be appeared as brutal, it can be appeared as vicious, but underneath that, it's actually coming from love, because that vicious or brutalness, it wakes us up. I know for me, there was a few different forms of deep unconsciousness that I interacted with that just it snapped me in a sense, and it was at that time I thought I was just a victim of insanity. But the truth of it is, and after years of studying and awakening, I realized it was actually a tremendous gift in disguise. Because I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for that. I wouldn't be living in so much peace and bliss and joy and just like ease. Because before that happened, I was in a lot of suffering. I was in a lot of depression and anger. Oh, I had tons of anger and resentment, so much lacking of forgiveness, not just of individuals, but myself and of the world. I mean, I just felt like a giant ball of mixed up confusion and emotions. Not a pleasant place to be. And maybe some of you feel like you're in that to some degree. And that's it's actually a really good place to be, because you're aware that you're in it. And yeah, so you're like right on the edge of where you want to be next. It is incredibly freeing and powerful, though, when we can genuinely recognize that our suffering has a purpose, and that we're not victims, but that we're students. It flips everything around, because then it's like, oh, every time I feel angry, every time I feel sad, every time I feel destroyed, every time I feel inferior, I'm not just a victim of the universe. of God or of people, of crazy people. I'm a student, and this is like a master class. And it's not an easy one, you know. It's not easy. But like, like in life, the challenges that are most difficult often hold the biggest rewards when we're sort of strong enough or confident enough in ourselves to get through them. If enlightenment was easy, everybody would be enlightened. It would be nice. But it is something you have to really cultivate, something you have to really work on. Make it a priority. We make all these other things priorities. We make making money and getting new clothes or a new car or whatever our goals are. Our goals are all over the place. Even more silly stuff like, oh, I've gotta win this game, or I've gotta, I don't know, I don't know what your goals are, but look at them. Prioritizing, recognizing where your priorities are, not conceptually, not what you would like to have your priorities at, but literally, like, be real and look at your actions in your everyday life. Where are your priorities really? Not the right answer. I don't, it's not about selling the right answer. It's about just saying, what is the answer that's happening? What answer is happening through you? Look at that, and you can kind of get an idea of where your priorities really are. And it can be humbling, but it can also be really powerful, because when you do recognize, like, oh, I'm spending so much time and energy, you know, with some silly game, when topics like figuring out who I really am and learning how to master myself and heal, are really more important to me. Okay, maybe I should make more time for this. Maybe even invest a little bit in this. I find it interesting how we tend to be. We all have a lot of pain body around money, or many of us do. Um, I even noticed, like, in the membership joining questions that ask, "How long would you like a membership?" And many people said, "Yes," or eternally. Eternal membership, and that's cool. I don't mind, but I think it does point to the fact that so many of us have a lot of pain body around money, especially when it's tied to spirituality in any way. But underneath that, it's like, well, what do we invest our time in? What do we invest our money in? We invest it in technology, in entertainment without blinking, right? You go see a movie, 10, $20 nowadays. Movies are a bit expensive to go see, but you go to a concert or all this entertainment. We're spending billions as a society on entertaining ourselves, and yet, that entertainment can be fun, but it's not solving anything. It's not getting to the root of our happiness and joy. It's actually feeding the temporary illusions and the addictions and the escapism. I don't know why that came up, but that's just a side note. Priorities. It is really important. And another thing for me, what kind of snapped me awake, and I really looked at my priorities in a fresh, different way, was when I realized that I'm not permanent. When I was younger, I kind of felt like I was invincible. And then I had a few different things happen where I realized, no, I'm not invincible. At least not in this physical form. I'm not. I can get hurt. I could die, and I don't know when I'm going to die. None of us really know when we're going to die. And oftentimes that not knowing can be very scary. So we run away from it. We distract ourselves. We ignore that possibility, or we just, oh, I don't really want to think about that right now. I'll think about that later. But that later, and that's just constantly later. It's never now. But there's a lot of power in just, in not necessarily playing these like horrid ideas of how you could die. That would just be fear and whatnot. but just recognizing, okay, I'm in a temporary form, and recognizing that this experience you're having right now is a fleeting temporary experience. It's actually really powerful. It really makes it more valuable because you're like, oh, I could lose this at any second. Let me really soak it up and enjoy it. Every time you're around a family member or a friend, you don't take it for granted. You see it like, wow, this is gold. I'm so grateful to have this moment with them. There's gratitude. There's no room for complaining. There's no room for drama or story. When you recognize your impermanence and you just really are so grateful for the gift that we have here and the experiences that we have here, the breath, there's no room for the negative, the drama, because of priorities. Yeah. When you recognize that you don't know when you're going to die, so let's say you get a thing and it's like, oh, you're going to die in a week. All right, well, your priorities are going to majorly shift. You're going to go, okay, what's most important to me? I'm not going to be worrying about this, or I'm not going to be worrying about that. I'm going to be worried, and then figure out like what would you be most about. For me, it would be like just surround myself with family and just have fun and just really be together and have genuine experience. And that's actually what I do. That's what I try to do. But so contemplating death can also be really powerful in making sure that we're sort of on track with where we want to be, with what we're doing, and maybe noticing a few things that we're doing that we wouldn't be doing if we recognized our time as being so valuable in this form, in this human form. Which is also why I find spirituality and studying spirituality and practicing to be high on my priority list. I want to master myself as much as I can in this life because I believe that any level of growth or evolution or maturity within myself, I get to carry on into my next form. So to me, it's like that's one of the most important ones. Because if I don't grow, if I don't learn and master things in this life, then I'm going to be struggling in the next one and the next one and the next one until I finally the light bulb clicks and I'm like, oh, all right, now let me take this seriously. I'm tired of suffering. Let me get out of this hell. But ironically, it's like we have to have a certain level of hell before we're willing to get out of it. Before we're willing to admit, oh, I'm a bit responsible for my own hell. Once you've had enough, as Eckhart says, when you've had enough, you've had enough. I think a lot of people they say they've had enough. They're like, oh, and they complain and like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. But there's another level of having enough where you're just like literally so burnt out from the drama of the mind and the stories and the complaints and the pain that you're really willing to drop it. To just be like, you know, that's when you really had enough. When you stop entertaining it, you stop circulating it in your head. But I used to think I had enough, yet I was still circulating it. I was still replaying stories that were creating pain in me. I wasn't willing to forgive. Forgiveness, that's a big topic. That's a big one. Forgiving others, obviously, is usually the first thing that comes up, but also very important, forgiving ourselves. One, for anything that we may have done in our past that we're not proud of, but also forgiving ourselves for the things that we didn't necessarily do, but that just happened to us. And yet some part of us blames us ourselves for it. The power of forgiveness is that, let's say take it on the first level of forgiving somebody else, right? Forgiving somebody else who's operating in insanity in some way, being really negative or judgmental or aggressive, and they're just they're not pleasant to be around, and they're coming at you. Well, forgiving them, it actually doesn't mean that they're free of consequence. Everybody has to deal with the consequences of their actions. That's karma, and like it's real. It's not some belief. Karma is reality. Reality is a constant cause and effect, and no one can escape the effects of their own causes. What we can do is learn from our effects to then change our causes, to then change our effects. But yeah, so the point here though is that karma is a master teacher, and nobody gets to escape it. But when you forgive someone for doing something to you or having done something to you, you're actually forgiving them for your own sake. Because holding on to resentment, holding on to that non forgiveness is painful. It's burning us. It's not burning them, it's burning us. Now our minds or egos are like, oh, I'm going to hate you because you did this to me and you're not going to like it. But meanwhile, they're on their own little worlds and they don't even know what's happening. They don't even know that you're resenting them or that you haven't forgiven them. They're in their own dramas and in their own karmas. But so much of forgiveness is about freeing ourselves from the stories, freeing ourselves from from the pain. And part of that too is forgiving ourselves for not having forgiven and been holding on to this pain for so long, not realizing like we have the choice to drop it. And the beauty of it too is like when you really forgive, you don't have any desire for someone else to experience negative karma. That's a part of it. If you wish negative karma on somebody else, you have not forgiven. The ego is trying to repair itself by making itself feel better because it's like, oh, you just wait till you get yours. No, 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 no. That's keeping you stuck. That is not true forgiveness. Now, it is also true that when you really deeply forgive someone, you're freeing yourself from that whole game and you're getting into peace and joy. And you're also cleaning up your frequency, so to speak, so you stop attracting a like frequency of that negativity. Yet at the same time, the person you're forgiving, more than likely, because they're operating in a bit of insanity and unconsciousness, are not even close to getting to where you are with studying this and with awakening. In their story is going to propel their own karma. And you kind of have to, if anything, I have compassion when I see somebody operating in such deep levels of negative karma. It's like, man, you're in a deep hole and there's no ladder to get out and they're just digging themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. That does not make me satisfied. It makes me feel compassion. I feel for that. It's not, they're in hell. It's not fun to be in hell. But the only way for them to get out is for them to do the same thing, to forgive. To forgive their everything in their past, which is a big part of why they act the way they act now. And also forgiving themselves for all their stuff that they know they've done and for all the stuff they didn't do. This is a really powerful pointer too, because it's pointing to the fact that everyone is on their own path, is in their own little world, so to speak, and they have their own lessons to learn at their own pace. We have to focus on our world and our lessons at our pace. The ego or the mind loves to focus on everybody else rather than constantly reflecting back on ourselves. Although in this way, we are also so often our greatest teachers. We are our own greatest teachers. When you start listening to when you point at someone else, when you really start to listen to that and stop pointing it at them, but just when you notice yourself pointing at someone, point that finger right back, whatever it is, whatever judgment or criticism or opinion. Whenever you find yourself pointing anything outside, point it back and humbly look at yourself with that same pointer. Very powerful practice, because then you become your own teacher. Because that's what a teacher, I mean, oftentimes, like a guru, right, is someone that brings light to darkness, that brings awareness to something that we were unaware of. And when you point at someone trying to teach them, but then you look at that yourself, you're like, wait, does that apply to me? And it so often does. Then it's like you've transmuted that the ego idea of like pointing at everything that's wrong and everything that's outside, and you've really just gone inward and humbly you can teach yourself. I believe that's, some people do make comment like, wow, you're pretty young to be that, yeah, you're pretty wise to be that young. Well, I don't know. I don't know if how that works really. What is age when we're talking about awakening, being life? What is a number? But also, I think a reason I've gotten to a certain place in the practice is because I have applied this. I have applied the pointing outward immediately means pointing at it myself. I've been doing that for years, and it's a fast track in a way. It's a fast track to really mastering yourself and understanding yourself. One definition of ego is a sense of separation, feeling separate from everyone and everything else in your world, in the world, in the present moment. And with that feeling of separation comes feelings of depression and suffering, judgment, negativity. When you start to do the reflective practice, whenever you're pointing outward, you're judging somebody else for where they are. You're feeding the separation. Whenever you recognize you're doing that and then point it back at yourself, you're feeding the union. You're feeding the bringing back to oneness, because you recognize that everything around you is somehow intimately connected to you. Not conceptually, though, but like really you feel it, you know it. And the more you start to do this, the more you start to really see, wow, nothing really does happen by accident. Everything really does have a reason. This is constantly reflecting us where our practice is, where we have work to do. Make sure I covered everything in this. In this. Oh, okay. So the individual mentioned that they find it incredibly difficult to practice and maintain in a consistent manner. Yeah, naturally so. If you were able to consistently practice this, you would literally be enlightened. That is what enlightenment is: consistent practice. And you don't get to enlightenment like by accident, so to speak. I mean, you hear some stories, right? Like Eckhart just had a suicidal night, and then I don't know, something clicked, and he woke up, and it was kind of a permanent shift. But for me, and for most people I know, it is not a permanent shift. It is a practice and a practice and a practice, 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 every second of every day of every week of every year. There's no holidays. There's no breaks. You take a break, you suffer. So, yeah, of course, it is difficult to maintain. And yet, however, wherever you are right now in your practice, in your ability to hold it, is exactly where you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be anywhere else. You're not supposed to be more enlightened. You're supposed to be exactly where you are. Ironically, when we really know this, we actually get to it a bit further. First, you have to really accept and work with where you are. Don't resist where you are, or you will fall further. But you just do your best and you work with this moment. How are you feeling in this moment? Is there a lightness or is there a heaviness? Work with this. When we have expectations of wanting a consistent practice, that's really our mind sneaking back in and not accepting what is, not accepting the present moment. It wants a future moment. And that's okay, but observe that, catch that pattern. Whenever you're observing something that's happening within you, mentally or emotionally, you are practicing. Just because it hasn't dissolved, just because you're not in a state of bliss and peace, does not mean you have lost your practice. If you're aware of what's happening in your present moment, you are practicing. The more you become aware of your present moment, the more you study and the more you apply other techniques, the more you can heal these things that you're aware of. But the most important part is bringing awareness to wherever we are, wherever we're losing our practice, wherever we're struggling, wherever we're suffering, wherever we're judging. Yeah, the individual also mentioned um, they formed a belief that these teachings are just not powerful enough to transform their depths of conditioning or of their pain body or their ego. And okay, recognized, okay, that's a belief, that's a thought. It's a very convincing thought. Yeah, but it is not true. Just because it's convincing, just because it's convinced you for an X amount of years doesn't make it true. Because these teachings go beyond all beliefs, all thoughts. That's how I know that nobody's lost, like nobody's condemned uh, beyond the point of return. It's not possible. Not a single individual in existence ever, let alone you, which I know I'm sure you are not nearly as lost as some of the people in human history. Yeah. But even every single person in existence um, has this potential for the teachings to work and to transcend these deep beliefs of unworthiness, yeah, or uh, see, but the mind would love for you to believe that that's true. If the mind can convince you that the teachings just aren't powerful enough, then the mind can maintain its power, its existence. It's reestablished itself and it said, I'm not going anywhere. Why? Because you believe that one little thought. They also mentioned that if I don't reach out and seek help, I could very easily find myself in desperation again. That is wisdom because it's based in experience, and you kind of know, like, if you don't take these teachings seriously, whether it's from me or from somebody else, you're going to fall right back down the rabbit hole, and you're going to go right back into your dramas and into your sufferings and into your pain bodies in a much deeper way than where you are now. That's wisdom. Listen to it. You know, like, don't let it, don't fall into the distraction stuff. Listen to what you already know, that running away from these teachings or these practices or putting them on the back burner just doesn't work. You could tell somebody that's younger or less experienced the same thing, and they'll be like, they won't learn. They don't know because they haven't experienced it. So they're kind of, we're hard-headed creatures, honestly. I think most of us are, and we got to learn the hard way. We can't just hear what's somebody else's advice. We have to learn the hard way. Well, you have learned the hard way multiple times because you've already said again that I could very easily find myself in desperation again, which means you've already found yourself in desperation, I'm guessing, quite a few times. But every time you catch yourself in desperation, it also means you're having a moment of awakening. The second we recognize we're suffering, the second we recognize we've lost our practice, we're back. Early on, when I got into these teachings and practices, I was doing that, slipping and catching. I don't know. I can't even count how many times. Probably hundreds of times in a day. Hundreds. that that mind patterns are so persistent. They're so like constant, and that's just our conditioning things. We could just keep catching up. I fell back into mind. I fell back into story. I fell back into suffering. Okay, present moment. Okay, everything's good here. Yeah, no, problems right here. Okay, feel better. And something happens. You follow that. You get pulled back into the story, into the dramas, into the pain. And eventually, you catch yourself and go, I fell back into the story again. Okay, this so much of the practice, which you'll probably hear me say quite a bit over these weeks and weeks that I'll be continue to make videos. So this actually comes to the end of this one. Although next we have the question and answer. I have a few good questions submitted by members here. And again, just a reminder, if you'd like to add your own questions for the Q&As or topics, feel free to message me or to put your question in the Q&A section or in the question section. Remember, just keep doing your best. This isn't about being perfect. So many of us have this conditioning of feeling like we have to be perfect. And we beat ourselves up when we lose the practice. We beat ourselves up when we find ourselves in suffering or in some bit of mistake or story or drama, or we catch ourselves judging someone. We beat ourselves up. Catch that. There's no need for that. You just are where you are. And it's true for everyone, not just you. This is true for every human on the planet. And some humans on this planet right now are really lost. And I know for sure nobody here is that lost. There's no way you would be here if you were that lost. So also give yourself credit. You've made a lot of progress. Just because you're not in constant state of enlightenment doesn't mean you haven't made progress. Yes, thank you everyone for being here. Enjoy the next 10, 15 minutes of the break, and I'll see you in the Q&A if you'd like to join now.